I think a Trump political dynasty is in the making.
The Republican base today is so enamored of Donald Trump that whatever he says at whatever moment, they're going to support.
The opposite of the extreme of Trumpism is sanity.
An AOC presidency or a Trump political dynasty? We are divided on that today on the Sanity Podcast. Welcome in, everybody. Dave Briggs and Allison Camerata, two former CNN and Fox News anchors. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
And just so you know our sanity perspective, because we were at CNN and Fox for so many years, we approach every story with curiosity. We have a perspective that looks at both sides. And in fact, many times there are more than just two sides. And today, our guest, Dave, is the co-founder of The Dispatch. Steve Hayes, we worked with him at Fox. He's such a brilliant political analyst. And he has also a lot of interesting and unpredictable takes on the politics of the day. So we're going to cover, and he has a lot to say about the political pendulum with the win of Mamdani in New York. What does that say about the political winds and which way they are blowing? Also, we're going to talk about the MAGA divide over Iran. And then Steve Hayes is going to share with us his breaking point at Fox and why he ultimately left there.
And why he didn't like much what Pete Hegseth said about his former colleague. But we're going to start with that pendulum, because on one side, there is the potential for a Trump political dynasty, at least in my estimation. On the other side, an AOC presidency. And you won't believe the man that threw out that theory. He is John Meacham, a Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer. He threw out this theory on The Daily Show. Listen.
When a pendulum goes this far, right, when it drops back, it doesn't go back to the middle. It keeps going. So you don't have... President Trump is not a recipe for us to have a president from the Brookings Institution next time, right? For some sort of moderate, we're all going to reason together. The pendulum will probably move pretty far that way. And I think... I never thought I would say this, but the longer President Trump governs the way he's governing, the more likely he's making the presidency of AOC.
Wowza! That is, of course, John Meacham. And Steve Hayes, let you react to that.
Yeah, I mean it's not a crazy hypothetical, right? I mean, I think there's logic to what John Meacham is saying there that seems to work. And when you look at the sort of strengthening of the fringes over the past decade, there's every reason to believe that he could very well be right, particularly at a time when the political parties seem much more interested in just grabbing power for the sake of grabbing power so that they can do whatever they want and punish their enemies. I would say, on the other hand, it seems likely to me that we're going to be facing some pretty big issues here in the coming months, years. Among them, maybe most especially, debt and deficit issues. We're $37 trillion in now. A lot of people don't want to talk about the debt crisis, but they will when we have one. And we will have one if we don't change our trajectory. And I think as we get more and more serious issues, people will look for leaders who can guide us through them in a smart and responsible way. And it's what keeps me optimistic, even in those moments where I'm not inclined to be optimistic.
I'm not buying that at all, man. I love you, and I've long been a fan of yours, but you make this country sound sane. And the reason
where am I wrong?
Sanity, the reason our show is called Sanity is because this country is largely not, and we're searching for that. Here's my theory, and I don't think anybody out there watching is going to like it. I'm not sure I like it. I think a Trump political dynasty is in the making because Eric Trump told the Financial Times he thinks it'd be easy. He'd consider it. Laura Trump is considering running in North Carolina, where, of course, there is an open seat. Steve, could we have a Trump political dynasty if the pendulum stays exactly where it is?
Sure. I mean, that's possible. There are other sort of heirs to Trumpism or MAGAism potentially. If you move outside the family, obviously J.D. Vance has done everything he can to be sort of MAGA plus. I mean, I don't think he's like in line with MAGA. He's MAGA and then some, Marco Rubio has accommodated himself to MAGA in a way that very few of us would have predicted 5-10 years ago. So I think there are all sorts of reasons to believe that the populism that you see on the right could continue. You'd be sort of a fool to bet against it in the short term. Having said that, populism often comes in bubbles. And when those bubbles burst, there is often a flight to quality that follows. And I believe that we may well see that flight to quality, particularly if, as I expect, and I worry, we start to see these issues get more and more serious. I mean, and we're flirting with some of them right now. I mean, you look at the dollar, you look at the sort of international economic implications of Trump's tariffs, if he actually implements them the way that he has talked about. You look at the debt and deficit crises, people are going to take their money and go elsewhere. That would have profound implications for the United States, for the international monetary system, in ways that I think voters might say, maybe this wasn't such a great idea.
Well, here's what I submit to you, gentlemen, to pick apart. I think that I disagree with Meacham's supposition. Although I always enjoy listening to him, and I think that obviously he's steeped in the history, but I do think that the opposite of the extreme of Trumpism is sanity and moderation. So he's saying that the opposite of an extreme is an extreme, but I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I think the opposite is like finding the center again and having gravity make sense again. We saw this the last time. Joe Biden was an extreme. The palate cleanser after Trump point one was moderation and something that we knew, and an old steady hand until it became unsteady. But that kind of thing is what the reaction was. Unsteady
and immoderate, if I can say. I think you're exactly right. Look, remember, there was a moment in that 2020 campaign where it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to be the Democratic nominee, right? Immediately. So what we're talking about in the future and what we're speculating about, we have actually seen in some ways. You can also see a scenario which, when we have sort of the serious kinds of issues that we have, people say enough, like we've been monkeying around.
Well, my theory, Allison, is I wish people voted on policy. Recent history suggests otherwise. And so whether it's Trump or whether it's AOC, I think people tend to vote right now more on personality. But the biggest reason that I don't think moderation is possible is look what's happened to moderates in the Senate and the House. They have all but disappeared. In the last week, we lost Tom Tillis, who's one of the few Republicans that dare speak out against dear leader, and Rep. Don Bacon from Nebraska, who's one of the other handful of Republicans who has the balls to stand up. So where are the moderates in Congress?
Those are moderate Republicans that you're talking about. And obviously Steve can weigh in on that. I mean, like the Mikey Sherrills, like there are people out there who are really promising politicians that are running and appear to be having some successful traction. But the moderate Republicans who speak out against President Trump get ousted.
Good point. Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger. I think I'm wholeheartedly, I think that would be great for the party. I'd just be surprised, Steve, if they will allow moderates to take the lead.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Spanberger is an interesting case, running in Virginia for governor, moderate Democrat. I think very smart, accomplished, has history at the CIA. She was somebody who spoke out on a private phone call that I think was later made public when Democrats were musing aloud about defunding the police. And she said, basically, I never want to hear about defunding the police anymore. This stuff is crazy. She's pretty popular in Virginia. I think it would be a tremendous upset if she were to lose in Virginia. And because Virginia is one of two gubernatorial elections in this off year, she's likely to get a lot of attention if she wins. So shining the light on moderate Democrats, you'll get a wave of stories that this is how to run. She's the model. Can you do it? Whether you can sort of extrapolate that out to the rest of the country, I think is an open question.
So, Steve, what about New York? So let's talk about if you think that this is some sort of bellwether for anything. So Zoran Mamdani won, and he's, I guess a self-described democratic socialist, whatever that means. And there was the old school Cuomo choice. And so does this mean that there's been some sort of seismic shift, or was he just a better campaigner?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always hesitant to offer monocausal explanations for interesting and complicated phenomena. So I'll dodge the question and offer multiple explanations. Look, I think he was a tremendously talented campaigner. You know, he did this interview, two segments on Meet the Press with my colleague Kristen Welker this weekend. She asked him, I think, a series of very tough questions, very tough follow-ups, and boy, is he smooth. He is really appealing. I think if you don't know anything and if you're looking for simple answers to complicated questions, he can be tremendously appealing. You know, when she asked him, "Do you think billionaires should exist?" He says, I don't want there to be billionaires.
Let me stop you right there, because I want the audience to hear that one, because I think this is a political ad for Republicans for years to come.
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
Yeah, he might be smooth, but that is a debacle right there for Democrats. Because, Allison, take that one step further. That is the redistribution of wealth. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that, Mr. Ex-Fox anchor, but
what else does it mean?
It means income inequality. It means vast, incredible disparities between 90% of the country and 99% and 1%. And that does feel wrong. Why do we need mega yachts and giga yachts? It is kind of gross.
Steve, we don't need them, but if we say they should not exist, what are we to do with their success and their wealth?
It is redistribution of wealth, and he's pretty open about it. I think, you know, that the way that he talks about it can appeal to people. I mean, there's like as Allison says, like, who needs billionaires anyway? Look, I think you have to then ask a series of follow-up questions. Okay, if we don't have billionaires, who makes that decision? He's making the decision that $1 billion is too much now. What's too much in a couple of years? 100 million, 10 million, a million? I mean, why do we really need millionaires, actually, come to think of it? I mean, if we have millionaires, you have some people who are making $18,000 a year. How is that fair?
You guys are doing math.
You can imagine.
It's not fair. You guys are inserting math into this. And I think that the point is more just the gut feeling of there's more billionaires now than ever. And that it's trending in that direction. And Jeff Bezos seems to have a lot of money and a really obnoxious yacht. And so I think that directionally, he was like, no, why do we need this?
Yeah. And look, that's why all the energy is on the AOC Bernie Sanders wing, where they are fighting oligarchy. And I understand that. But again, to Steve's point, like, okay, at what point do we cap wealth? And then how do we stop it? What are the mechanisms? And I think that is a really devastating line. Here's another one that I think will hurt Democrats in 26 and 28.
Quote it for folks is to shift the tax burden from overtaxed homeowners in the outer boroughs to more expensive homes in richer and whiter neighborhoods. Explain why you are bringing race into your tax proposal.
That is just a description of what we see right now. It's not driven by race. It's more of an assessment of what neighborhoods are being undertaxed versus overtaxed.
Okay, Steve, if he was as smooth as you believe he is, he would have said, I'm taking the word white out. I do not want race to factor in to the tax burden.
Yeah, look, I mean, he is a radical. And what the way that he tried to clean up, I think the very appropriate question from Kristen didn't work. Right. And she had a couple of follow-ups in which he couldn't explain why he had invoked race to make his argument. I think the problem, I mean, there are many problems I have with him. I think he'd be a disaster for New York City. But among the many problems is these are lines that can sound good when he first utters them. They're lines that can appeal to people when he's running around New York City making, cute and clever videos that he can post on social media. When he's running against somebody scandal plagued and a disgrace like Andrew Cuomo, he can look pretty good in the abstract. And it may be the case because of the current, sort of calamitous political situation in New York City that it's enough to get him elected. I do think when he has to explain these in greater detail, it becomes a problem. I mean, whether it was globalize the intifada, whether it was getting rid of billionaires, whether it was talking about these things in explicitly and directly and unapologetically racial terms, that's a problem. And I don't think that most of the country thinks the way that he thinks.
But Steve, do you think that we just had Joe Walsh, former, Tea Party congressman turned
Not the guy from the
MAGA
Eagles.
supporter. We just had
Life's been good.
him on. And so he was saying that it's geographic, that, we tend to think of these things as major trends in broad brushstrokes, but what's good for Manhattan today isn't necessarily good for Texas, for the Democratic Party, isn't necessarily good for what's happening in fill in the blank, Michigan.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so do you see this as saying something about the Democratic Party as a whole?
He could not run for governor of Virginia the way that Spanberger is running for governor of Virginia. It wouldn't work. And so I do think you have to be careful to sort of see something that happens in a political moment, I think a unique political moment, and just pick it up and plop it down somewhere else. Having said all that, the point you made at the beginning, I think applies here. This is still a populist moment. These arguments are popular on the Democratic left. That is the center of gravity. You can get more people to come out and door knock for you if you're making radical arguments that energize young people and get them out to the polls and get them out to do volunteer work, get them to be activists.
I don't think a lot in cable news right now, CNN, MSNBC, namely, are doing a great job at just admitting Trump is winning right now, whether you like it or not. I think he's really on a win streak. One guy that has said that on CNN, my cable news man crush, which is Michael Smerconish, talked about that. He named all these things, guys: the Iran strike, our allies increasing NATO defense spending, the stock market, both the NASDAQ and the S&P are at record highs at the moment. The border is closed, essentially. The Supreme Court continues to rule in the president's favor. And lastly, he named Zoran Mamdani as very good reasons that Trump had his best week of the presidency and is on a roll. Listen.
This time is different. This time he came with a plan and a cabinet with senior advisors comprised of loyalists, all well known to the president. And recently, he's exhibited a more layered approach to governing on both the domestic and international front, no longer solely guided by winning each day's news cycle. By any objective measure, President Trump has his opponents on the run.
I don't disagree with Michael that Trump probably had the best week of his presidency. I do think it's a mistake sometimes when he has a good week. I think there's an inclination for those of us who are, who follow this closely and are paid to make sense of it all, to impose order on it from the outside that doesn't exist in reality. I don't think it was the case that Donald Trump had a detailed, long plan on what to do with Iran. I think he had been pretty consistent that Iran was not going to be allowed to get a nuclear bomb. But by most accounts, if you look at the way that his decision-making process progressed, he saw the Israelis have tremendous success in their first overnight bombing. He was impressed by this. He did a series of interviews with John Carl of ABC News, Bret Baier of Fox News, Dana Bash of CNN, talked to these reporters and sort of wanted to get in on the credit and the good press that Israel was having for having done what Israel did. And then after a series of continued back and forth, decided that he was going to be the guy to go in and finish the job. I think some of it does have to do with Donald Trump wanting to win the news cycle. Now, I think this was something that probably had to be done for 20 years. And Trump deserves credit for doing something that other presidents wouldn't do. I think we'll be better off, even if there are complications. I think we're likely to be better off for having taken out this ability of the Iranians, or potential ability now. But it's complicated. And I don't think that what we saw was a result of detailed planning by the president.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you saying that Donald Trump is not known for detailed plans. I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. And so I just think that assigning to him some sort of strategy or critical thinking or detailed plans, which we know from experience demonstrably is not how he operates. He operates by whoever he spoke to last, often, or a shoot from the hip, or vindictiveness. I mean, these are truisms I'm speaking. So the idea that, yes, Dave, he had a good week. I don't know if that changes his entire dynasty and legacy, but he had a good week, and that's great. It's great for everybody in the country to feel as though our president wins sometimes and has a good week, for sure. But what's interesting, Stephen, I want to get to this. What did you think of the MAGA divide? What did you think of the Tucker, Steve Bannon, Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking out against Trump? Candace Owens says, I regret encouraging people to vote for him and speaking out publicly, which is rare, against Trump. And then versus Fox, let's say, who was, all in on the Iran strike and even regime change.
Yeah. Well, I come to this, I think, from a place of skepticism that the MAGA base was ever as sort of pacifist or non-interventionist that as people imagined. I mean, basically, the MAGA base is still the Republican base. The Republican base is still, by and large, hawkish. That's going to be the case, I think, forever. Doesn't mean that they didn't want to applaud Donald Trump when he criticized the Bush administration for Iraq, or, helped channel frustrations that people might have had about overextension in our foreign policy in the past. But fundamentally, I think they're a pretty hawkish group, and we're seeing that now. So, Tucker can say what Tucker wants, but ultimately, he's not going to change fundamentally the MAGA base. And then the second point I would make is the Republican base today is so enamored of Donald Trump that whatever he says at whatever moment, they're going to support. So it could be the case that on a short-term basis, if he had chosen not to do this and said, you know what, we're wiping our hands, we're stepping back, we're not going to do that, you'd get polls that suggested that this was the wise decision made by the president, even if sort of at their core, they don't really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the latter part is the most important and where you really nailed it, because I don't think the MAGA base is any more hawkish about foreign wars than they are about being deficit hawks. Like, they loved Elon Musk cutting, everything in sight until the big, beautiful bill came along and expanded the deficit by $3 to $4 trillion. What about those deficit concerns? I don't think there's a whole lot of policy in MAGA anywhere. Do you, Allison? I think largely immigration is really the one issue that matters there.
No, I totally agree with you, David. So I just thought that was an interesting moment where Tucker was so vociferously against some of the Fox hosts. And, Steve, I mean, all three of us have been at Fox. What do you think now from the outside as you watch where Fox is today?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to watch this sort of recalibrations from some of our former colleagues. I think you have people like Brian Kilmeade, for instance, who's always been pretty hawkish, and I think actually knows foreign policy and national security better than most people give him credit for. I think he actually studies it. He cares about it. He pays attention to it. And he's been pretty consistent. The more interesting case is somebody like a Molly Hemingway, who used to be on the special report panel when I was doing it, and she's still there. She put out a series of tweets maybe 2-3 weeks ago before Trump got the United States involved in the way that he did. And it was warning. And she said, if you, Donald Trump, engage in even escalating this at all, if you take Israel's side, if you get the United States involved, if you endorse their escalation, it'll be the end of your movement, the end of your presidency, sort of you'll be finished, and it'll be a betrayal of everything you've said. I'm paraphrasing, so those are not direct quotes, but they're pretty close. And she has very quickly, this is to your point, Dave, reaccommodated herself, so this all happens. And she says, well, it is a good thing that, we did some damage to Iran's nuclear program. And aren't we lucky to have someone with the wisdom and judgment of a Donald Trump at this moment, even if we'd been skeptical, just on and on, because they ultimately just want to be cheerleading Trump.
Which begs the question, do you think there's anything Donald Trump could do or say that Fox News would openly on the air criticize?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, there's no monolithic Fox News, right? I mean, we all know this. It's individual anchors, it's individual commentators. Maybe you guys had different experiences. We certainly received guidance from time to time. I didn't ever have anybody say to me, like, you can't say this thing because you are on Fox News every day. I think there's a sense at Fox of what the suits want, and people who care a lot about being on air know that in order to continue to be on air, they should say the things that the producers want, because the producers know what the audience wants, and what the audience wants means that you'll be on air a lot. So I think that dynamic shapes the kind of commentary from contributors and others that you see as much as anything.
You didn't answer my question, sir, so I'll try it again. What, if anything, could Donald Trump say or do that Fox would openly and on air criticize?
I don't know is the right answer. I mean, there was some criticism of his tariffs when the markets were spooked. some Fox people got spooked, and there was some criticism of, or at least questioning of, his tariff proposals. But it will never be, you'll never see criticism of Donald Trump on that network, I think, in a way that you saw criticism of Joe Biden on that network.
God, please. My head just exploded. Yes, I did have people tell me all the time I couldn't say
Right?
certain things. Well, primarily Roger Ailes, and then his various mouthpieces. But that was a, I would say, defining feature of my time at Fox, of Roger and his various mouthpieces taking issue with some position that I was trying to get out, some other position other than the Fox position that I was trying to get out to the viewers. Yeah, that was a big challenge, for sure. But you resigned, I think, from Fox in 2021 because of, it was, I mean, I think if I can paraphrase what you were saying then, it was getting more conspiratorial and crazier. And has that, I mean, do you regret leaving? Do you think that it has gone on that path?
Yeah, I don't at all regret leaving. I mean, I think it was complicated. Jonah Goldberg and I were both at Fox, and we'd both launched the Dispatch in 2019 as a place that people could, a center-right outlet, conservative outlet, unapologetically so, where we were telling people, come here for fact-based reporting and analysis. We care about depth, context, and understanding. We aren't into hot takes. We aren't into instant outrage. We want to, help you understand what's going on. And, having started that in 2019 and then been at Fox through that whole period, it was increasingly uncomfortable. The day-to-day at Fox was increasingly in tension with what we were trying to build. So there was a build up to it. But yeah, certainly, Tucker Carlson had this documentary called Patriot Purge, in which he, I think, took really the first step, and it turns out to be a pretty important one, in writing the revisionist history of January 6th, where they made the claims over, video images of Americans in orange jumpsuits. They claimed that Americans were being taken to Guantanamo because they were Trump supporters, and literally at different points suggested that Americans who were Trump supporters were being treated by the federal government the exact same way that Al-Qaeda had been treated by the U.S. government. It was just not true and misleading, and I thought dangerous. Joan and I thought dangerous, and it was, you were seeing more of that certainly at Fox. And I'd either see clips on social media the next day, or I would see things, if I tuned into primetime, and I would just say, that just doesn't even resemble things that are true. Why are we doing this? And then, of course, you later had all of the texts and emails that came out in the Dominion lawsuit, where we saw sort of in black and white in writing that some of these people who were making these arguments didn't even believe the things that they were saying on air. And so that caused me a lot of problems. I will say, and I try to say this every time I talk about Fox, I don't talk about this very often, but there are really good journalists at Fox. You know them, I know them. There are really good producers. There are good editors. There are people behind the scenes. There are good on-air people who are trying to do journalism the right way. I just think they're crowded out and in many ways overwhelmed by the charlatans who are selling bullshit, usually at night.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Then I couldn't agree more. And they also don't get the airtime. I mean, they intentionally don't get the airtime. I mean, intentionally, the executives don't put those good journalists on. And look at the fight that just brewed between Pete Hegseth, former Fox host, and Jennifer Griffin, who's an excellent journalist.
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer's been great. She's, I think, in many ways, the model of a terrific reporter. And I've thought that I've known her for almost 2 decades. When she reports stuff that I don't agree with, it makes me think twice. It makes me change my mind. Like, oh, Jennifer is reporting this. I need to go and double check because she's so good. And for Pete Hegseth to attack her, I was disappointed that more of her Fox colleagues didn't step up to defend her, because most of them know how good she is and what she does and what a pro she is. And they don't have to like what she's reporting every day, but they know that she puts in the work and she's really good at what she does. If we ran some experiment where we went back and checked now what Jennifer Griffin was reporting in real time over the past 2 decades, I mean, what's she hitting? 950, 980? Like, she's right because she's just that good.
Yeah, that makes her a Hall of Famer in any book. Just one more question on that before we're about to wrap up. What did you make of the fact that the attack on the press of Pete Hegseth as well, and kind of, to me, using the military as like a shield or a prop in this battle against the media?
Yeah, I mean, I feel about it sort of the way I feel about a lot of this stuff. I mean, as with, I think, a lot of the critiques of the press, there's often something there. If I were advising Pete Hegseth, I would not have said what he said when he said, our boys did a great job, or whatever he said, because there was at least one female pilot. It wasn't accurate. Shouldn't have said it. Should be more thoughtful the way that he said it in the first place. But it did become this kind of thing that I think most people aren't really consumed with or worried about. And to keep getting questions, I think the questions would have been better directed at the kinds of claims that they were making in those early hours that were not provable. I mean, Pete Hegseth, in his first press conference, immediately after those Iran strikes, said something, and again, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, he thanked everybody involved. There's hundreds, thousands of people involved, and everybody executed their job to perfection. And that's what made this thing. Look, that's not true. Like, undoubtedly, there were many mistakes. Like, come on, that's not true. Or the immediate claims that the president made, Pete Hegseth and others echoed, that we know that these things were obliterated. I'm totally open to the possibility that they were obliterated. That's some serious hardware we dropped. Do we know 2 hours in that the Iranian nuclear sites were obliterated? Of course we didn't know that.
It's not possible.
Totally legitimate.
Not possible to know it.
Yes. Totally legitimate to really press them on those substantive issues.
What really pissed me off is, look, I watch a lot of media because we discuss it here on this show. And when he made the media questioned him, as they should have. That's their job. But also, I didn't hear anyone in the media disparaging the men and women of the military. And that's what Hegseth's accusation was. Not anyone at MSNBC, not anyone at CNN. The people that reported at CNN about this bombing probably care about the military more than about anybody I know. So that is what really pissed me off.
No, I agree. I mean, his diatribe was ridiculous. I mean, I think he looked foolish doing it, and it wasn't relevant. I mean, it was straw man after straw man after straw man.
All right. Go ahead,
okay,
Dave.
so Allison and I always like to ask our guests a dose of sanity, but I think we've already asked you that. And a lot of people, when it comes to sanity these days, we all need to get off our devices. That's part of the reason we are all insane, and I'm as bad as anybody, which brings us to the point you actually attempted to lay down the law and maybe some new rules of the road with your kids. Tell us about that, and how's it going?
Yeah, we did. Well, it's very soon, so I'm not going to declare victory. I probably never can declare victory on something like this, but my wife and I, sat our kids down yesterday, and we had about a 5-hour session. And I went and got some nice steaks beforehand to keep them interested. That was kind of our halftime. So we started out and we showed them the documentary, The Social Dilemma, where Allison has a cameo. She's in the film. I think she's reading like a setup on a news story about social media. And it's a really interesting, really thoughtful, but somewhat over the top documentary on the damage of social media for young people. So we showed it to them, and then we had a discussion. My kids range from age 20 to age 8. So different conversations about what they took away from the movie. And then we went back and I shared, there was a really interesting article from NPR. There was a CBS News segment on what this actually does to your brain if you're looking at MRIs, the addictive qualities. Now we have a ton of research. Now we know what it does to mental health, particularly for girls. And with that knowledge, it would be irresponsible for us as parents to allow them to continue to be on their phones for hours and hours a day. So we set some new rules. None of these are ground shaking. Phones outside the bedroom. No sleeping with phones in the bedroom at night. We came up with a time cap. My original proposal was 90 minutes a day. That was met with scorn and skepticism.
Like breakfast.
So they came back and they said 2.5 hours a day for 2 weeks, with the target being 2. So we'll see And I'm doing it too. So the other thing is I immediately deleted Twitter and Instagram from my phone. And Twitter for me is work. Instagram for me is fun. So I spent a lot of time on Twitter getting information from, reporters I follow and people I trust and understanding what people who don't agree with me are saying. But I'm done with Twitter, at least on my phone.
So how are you going to fill that void? Where are you going to get that information?
I mean, it's a good question. I'm not doing the kind of minute by minute daily journalism that I did when we were all at Fox together. So it's less important that I know what happened 4 minutes ago, I think, and more important that I'm going back to reading 3 full newspapers every morning and my morning dispatch newsletter from beginning to end. Things like that, so that I really know what's going on rather than reacting to the news nugget of the moment.
Better than, going off booze in the month of dry January. I want to hear how this clears things up. I'm north of 10 hours a day, and I'm not proud of it.
Wow.
I need to do some work.
And that's just on your phone? Is that on your computer too, or just on your phone?
Just my phone. Now, I do listen to Sirius when I drive around, which counts. So I do think that's an inflated number, but still that puts me, 8?
8. That's crazy, Dave. I think that, Steve, just as a final point on this, there's something in terms of sanity and our brand. There's something about slow news, which I think we used to call newspapers. That is so much easier to digest for your nervous system.
Yeah, you can understand it. You can process it. I mean, look, not to do a promo for the Dispatch, but like when we launched in 2019, that's literally what we said to people. We're going to slow the news cycle down. We're not going to chase our tails. We're going to take time. If a Fed report comes out on Wednesday and we can't get to the right people to help us understand it until Friday, we're okay. We'll put it out on Friday. We're fine with that. And I think it does a lot for actually understanding what's going on in the world around us.
I love it. Dave, take a note.
Yeah, I am definitely taking notes. He is the co-founder and the CEO of the Dispatch. Where can we hear the podcast before we go?
Search Dispatch Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, and we're at thedispatch.com.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Steve, thank you. So great to talk to you.